This is pure power before our eyes.
Well, what did Seth say months and months ago? Absolute domination. Absolute power.
These four men own this industry.
And that is what Seth Rollins' vision has always been, to take complete control of WWE as his greatest champion with his greatest team. Wait a minute! Oh my God! Breaker just speared Rollins! What the hell is going on? Heyman is shocked! Bronson remade his choice, all right. Bronson remade his choice.
Oh no, so nobody! What the hell is going on?
Heyman trying to call off the dog.
It's too late.
Rollins he's been knocked off the mountaintop. Heyman's got no choice. Well, ladies and gentlemen, Rollins called here for the undisputed future of the industry. Well, folks, the future is now. A coup of epic proportions tonight.
RIP to the Vision 2025 to 2025. It is already done and dusted. Bron Breakker and Bronson Reed turned on Seth Rollins, and that is probably the end of the Vision, because it wouldn't make sense to continue the Vision on with Heyman, Bronson Reed and Bron Breakker whilst calling themselves the Vision when you just took out the Visionary. Although Judgment Day continued without Edge, and whilst Edge has no real links to the name Judgment Day, it was ultimately his faction and they did take over and run it without him, whilst also having his entrance music for a large part of the first year as they carried on. And this turn was pretty much exactly the same as that one, with Seth Rollins taking younger wrestlers under his wing and them eventually deciding to turn on him in what was a shock moment, but a moment that ultimately doesn't make any sense whatsoever. Why would you start this group and then not name this group for about 4 or 5 months, and then name the group, and then a couple of months after you name the group, you decide to dismantle the group when you have the Survivor Series coming up, when it made absolute sense for this group to be a major part of the Survivor Series and form most of the heel team for War Games? It doesn't make any sense at all. And I know some people are reacting to it. Obviously, it's a massive swerve. But was it a swerve for the sake of a swerve? Obviously, WWE are in a situation at the moment where they have declining ratings. Suddenly, people are deciding not to buy those ticket prices, pay those ticket prices. People are turning on Triple H in the IWC in massive numbers. They're also turning on TKO because of the ticket prices and because of the Saudi mania. And was this a desperate attempt to get people back on side? But ultimately, next week, you need to make this make sense.
You know, they say all men are created equal, but you look at me and you look at Small Joe, and you can see that statement is not true. See, normally if you go one-on-one with another wrestler, you got a 50-50 chance of winning. But I'm a genetic freak, and I'm not normal. So you got a 25% at best at beating me. And then you add Kurt Angle to the mix, your chances of winning drastically go down. See, the three-way at Sacrifice, you got a 33 and a third chance of winning. But I got a 66 and two-thirds chance of winning because Kurt Angle knows he can't beat me, and he's not even going to try. So, Samoa Joe, you take your 33 and a third chance minus my 25% chance, and you got an 8 and a third chance of winning at Sacrifice. But then you take my 75% chance of winning, if we used to go one-on-one, and then add 66 and two-thirds percent, I got a 141 and two-thirds chance of winning at Sacrifice.
So given that this is a Steiner involved in this situation, and we're talking about Bron Breakker, of course, maybe things don't need to make sense. Maybe he just applies some Steiner maths as to why he did this, and we just move along with it and accept that this is what's happening. Ultimately, the only real reason that they have is because Seth Rollins made some comments about how he did everything by himself. But ultimately, there is more strength in numbers. Ultimately, you have Survivor Series War Games coming up ahead, where this should have been a team, along with Brock Lesnar joining them. And now you have a situation where, unless you're just going to go with Steiner maths, this is going to be very, very difficult to explain. Also, where does it leave Seth Rollins? Is Seth Rollins now a babyface? Is Seth Rollins now on the same side as CM Punk and Roman Reigns when he was in the midst of a feud with both of them? He still hasn't had the major match with Roman Reigns. They've been teasing that for about 5 years. That still hasn't happened on a major pay-per-view since we had the disqualification at the Royal Rumble when Seth Rollins dressed up in his Shield gear. We've not had the rematch since then, so we haven't had that major match on pay-per-view. We also haven't had a conclusion to the CM Punk feud, and CM Punk is now the number one contender for the championship that Rollins has as a heel. But then two other heels from his group just turned on him. So did they turn babyface and Seth's still a heel? Or did Seth Rollins turn babyface and he's going to face CM Punk as a babyface, but CM Punk is still a babyface and Roman Reigns is, of course, still a babyface who wants vengeance on Bronson Reed, who beat him in Australia at Crown Jewel, which looked like it was going to set up the Survivor Series War Games match because you had the Usos involved in that as well. And now everything has changed on a whim. Now, originally, as people will know, if you listened to the Wrestling Informer, as I've already broken this story earlier on this year, you guys will know that there was never actually supposed to be a group anyway. So that was a reason why it took so long to name, and that's why we also had to wait for a third member to be added in Bronson Reed, and then a fourth, I guess, with Becky Lynch being added as well. But originally, this was supposed to just be a two-man power trip with Bron Breakker and Seth Rollins. That was the original plan. The original plan was for Bron Breakker to win Money in the Bank, not Seth Rollins. The plan was for Bron Breakker to be Mr. Money in the Bank. The plan for Seth Rollins was to simply beat Jey Uso at SummerSlam for the championship. Jey Uso was supposed to carry the belt to SummerSlam, lose it to Seth Rollins, and then Bron Breakker was supposed to cash in the Money in the Bank on Seth Rollins. Paul Heyman would have turned on Rollins and we would have said, my guy is Bron Breakker. That was the original plan. So we're kind of back to where we were supposed to be. And one of the main reasons why we pivoted was because there was a decision to start a group and to add more members to it and give them that Rollins rub. And B, Jey Uso very, very early on wasn't succeeding as a champion. WWE saw the backlash online and there was even discussions about maybe not even pulling the trigger at WrestleMania. They pulled the trigger in the end. They gave him a trial run. Jey Uso also didn't conduct himself well as champion behind the scenes. There are a lot of complaints from fans about his conduct, a lot of complaints from WWE PR people who had to work with Jey. And it was decided ultimately that the role was too big for him. And they decided to pivot towards Gunther very, very quickly and go with Seth Rollins winning the Money in the Bank instead and deciding to make this a group, make it an actual faction, add Bronson Reed and give it a name. That's why it took forever to actually give it a name. And I reported that as it was happening. So those guys who know, who listen to the Wrestling Informer will know that this is something I've already said. So it might not come as a major surprise to you guys that we are here, but it is still really quite odd to do it just before the Survivor Series. And you did add Bronson Reed. You did give the group a name. You're well in a feud with a number of babyfaces. Rollins as a heel is key to that. The feud with CM Punk, Roman Reigns, LA Knight, the Usos. You're in a feud with all of them. And also, you've teased reuniting Paul Heyman with Brock Lesnar. So Brock Lesnar was obviously going to be a part of this team. As I reported over the weekend, Austin Theory is ready to return, and Austin Theory was supposed to return and be a part of this War Games match as well. So it would have been Lesnar and Theory teaming up with the three members of the Vision, and now you've gone in a completely different direction. This could be down to Seth Rollins possibly being injured in the Cody Rhodes match, or maybe this is a way for WWE to completely change direction. Maybe this is WWE saying that this is the top act on Raw. This is the number one act on Raw. This is the act expected to generate interest and therefore generate ratings. And if the ratings aren't there, then usually you have to point the finger to whatever you're delivering on top. So whilst WWE were having a field day, selling out buildings, printing money, getting rave reviews online from the IWC, everything was positive with the WWE when Roman Reigns was on top and the Bloodline were on top, and we were doing all of that stuff with Sami Zayn as well, which for me was peak Bloodline. That was the act that was on top, and ratings and business were going well. But as we enter this stage in late 2025, business is not going well. Ticket sales are declining. There is now a backlash against TKO. People are complaining about TKO. People are even saying, wow, we didn't know how good we had it under Vince McMahon. The storylines on TV are non-existent. There has been negative backlash towards Triple H as well. There is a lack of interest in this Vision storyline. There is generally a negative attitude towards the pay-per-view cards. WWE pay-per-view cards have generally under-delivered throughout this year. Now, Crown Jewel, which we are going to talk about on the show, did receive a positive review. It got itself a B from ESPN, which people thought was still harsh because a lot of people had this Crown Jewel show as an A show. I didn't, but the C for WrestlePalooza was fair. The C for WrestlePalooza was actually probably generous. I don't know anybody that enjoyed the WrestlePalooza show. SummerSlam was very good, but prior to SummerSlam, the WWE had a string of duds, including WrestleMania. And WrestleMania in this day and age, with the prices that you're charging for tickets and the fact that you've made it a two-night WrestleMania, should never, ever be a dud under any circumstances. There can be WrestleManias that are better than other WrestleManias, but as a whole, the show should not be a dud. And I went to the show. Night one was very, very hard to watch until that main event. The main event saved it. And night two was the opposite. Night two was a lot better from start to finish until we got the main event. And then the main event took away from the good night because it was one of the worst, if not the worst main event in history. Now, this is a year where we've had one of the worst main events in history. This is a year where overall we had a bad WrestleMania. This is a year where overall we've had underwhelming and bad pay-per-views where people are complaining a lot about the format. People don't like the 5-6 match format and just getting these long matches, whilst the PLEs are also saturated with commercial breaks and sponsorship and too many videos advertising. On this occasion, it was Australian tourism. And obviously we know we're going to get the build-up packages, the hype videos for all of the matches. I have no problems with that. But there's just too much of a gap between the matches, and it makes the pay-per-views even more difficult to watch. And on top of having just 5 matches, knowing that everybody's going to be getting 20 minutes at least. So that's not really working for people. The storylines going into the pay-per-views are not working for people. They flubbed a lot of stuff this year. A number of superstars are in quite poor positions. They've not been booked well. So you would say they're probably poorer off than they would have been under Vince McMahon. And you can say that for a number of people. The booking of Roman Reigns, I think, has been particularly poor. I don't think Cody's working as a champion. They completely blew John Cena's farewell tour, and Cena's doing everything he can to save it. He tried to save it when he was a heel, even though he's given nothing to work with. And now he's trying to save it as a babyface. And this isn't on John Cena. This is completely on Triple H and the booking team. The creative's been poor. You can't even blame it on The Rock. You could have done at a certain point, but WWE had a lot of time to rectify things. And overall, Cena's farewell tour has been what it never should have been. Underwhelming.
I am going to ruin wrestling. To ruin wrestling for every fan, for every wrestler, for everyone.
6 months ago, we thought that was a wrestling storyline. We didn't know John Cena was a fucking mouthpiece for TKO, but that's exactly what it seems like he is at the moment. When you look at the stale product on television, when you look at the declining ratings because of the stale product on television, when you look at the horrendous ticket prices, when you look at Mark Shapiro talking about Vince McMahon and saying Vince McMahon had things wrong because he was pricing up his tickets for families, and we're not going to be pricing things up for families, that kind of tells you that TKO, they are the real ones ruining wrestling. So it's kind of like they put these words into John Cena's mouth. And obviously all of this stuff is coincidental. But if there's any year you could point to and say, this is the one that's ruined wrestling, it would be this one. And whilst it's probably not the worst year ever when it comes to stories and in-ring action, it is the worst year ever when it comes to expectation versus reality. Because the expectation going into this year was bigger than any other year that I can remember for a long, long, long time. 2023 was excellent. We had an incredible WrestleMania at WrestleMania 40 in 2024. We had a great SummerSlam in 2024. Obviously, the Cody run wasn't hitting quite the same as the Roman Reigns one, but Roman Reigns was off TV between WrestleMania and SummerSlam, and then he returned at SummerSlam. So it was interesting to see what direction we were going in with Roman Reigns. You also saw CM Punk return to the ring at SummerSlam. He had that great feud, which concluded at the end of 2024 with Drew McIntyre. Everybody was looking forward to WWE debuting on Netflix. We thought this was going to be a brand new era and the next step towards WWE moving forwards and gaining even more momentum. Instead, it has been much more like that they have ruined wrestling. And that feels like it's true right now. And for me in particular, I'm experiencing some symptoms of that. This really does feel like the first year where I can ever see myself possibly not watching wrestling anymore at some point. And whilst I don't realistically think that will ever happen, and when I said this to Cav, he pretty much laughed in my face and said, "You'll never stop watching, you're a lifer." And I probably am. But there are levels to that. There are levels to being a lifer. Some lifers give over a lot of money. They buy merchandise. They collect figures. They go to events. They go to pay-per-views. And that's pretty much where I've been most of my life. Over the past few years, I haven't been buying as much stuff because my place is becoming very cluttered. And sometimes I look at things and think, why do I need this? Why do I need to buy this? Why did I ever buy this? Why do people collect things? Because ultimately, no matter how many collectibles and autographs and things that you have, you're going to die, and nobody's going to want your shit when you're gone, unless obviously you have somebody to pass it down to. And for me, that would have been my son. But my son in particular, one of the main reasons why I've been able to watch this product as religiously as I have, because prior to Austin being born, I was becoming very disconnected with it around about 2010, 2011. So my son was almost born at the perfect time, and he got into it when he was about 2 years old, so 2013, 2014 time. He got into the product. And it was a new set of eyes watching WWE with me. So that rejuvenated my interest at the perfect time, just as it looked like I might dip out. And for me, dipping out would have been not buying things, not giving WWE my money, not going to pay-per-views in the US, not flying across to the US and paying to watch pay-per-views, not watching all the shows when they came over to the UK. That, for me, is my fandom dwindling. It's not necessarily a case of not following the TV product anymore, but that is the next stage when you're not staying up for Raw, or when you're not watching Raw on Tuesday morning, or sometimes in my case recently, I've finished Raw as late as Thursday. I've found Raw so boring that I've watched it in many intervals, whilst either having my 10K walks, or watching it at the gym, or just putting it on and just forcing my way through it whilst working in the background, whilst largely being on my phone. And it hasn't been helped by the fact that my son, he's decided to consume the content via YouTube only. It's been a long time since my son sat down and watched a full episode of Raw and SmackDown. He is one of those YouTube consumers that Vince Russo talks about on his show. So, A, it doesn't help that my son, who has been watching with me for the past 12 years, doesn't watch the show anymore in the same way that I watch it. B, I look forward always to going to these shows because I've always normally got a WWE show booked, which also coincides with a holiday. But I've reached a point now where I'm saying enough is enough. I ain't paying those prices. I ain't paying $1,000 to go to any wrestling show unless it is a show where you are going to see something the caliber of Rock and Roman Reigns or something comparable. But I've given up on that now. And last year, they got my money for WrestleMania 41, and I massively regretted buying into it. I fully bought into that Cena heel turn. I wasn't going to that WrestleMania, and as soon as Cena turned, suddenly, overnight, I was. And we ended up there, and it was massively underwhelming. And whilst I did go to SummerSlam, and for SummerSlam, I paid a fraction of the price, and I always like going to SummerSlam because it's been a big part of my summer holidays over the past 3-4 years. It's somewhere I always go to with my son. Basically, SummerSlam will dictate where we go to, and if we don't like the state, we'll then tie it in together with leaving that state and going to visit a state that we actually want to go to. So Orlando's always popular, New York's always popular, California and Vegas, they're always popular. So if we end up going to a SummerSlam, which and somewhere like Cleveland, which we did go to, we left Cleveland and then we did 2 weeks in Orlando. And on this occasion, when we went to SummerSlam, which was in New York and New Jersey, we did a full week in New York and New Jersey, but then we went to Orlando again because we wanted to take the opportunity to go to Epic Universe. Now, I don't have that stuff to look forward to because I'm just not paying these prices. I don't have any WWE events booked. I was planning to go to the John Cena farewell match, but I'm not interested in seeing that anymore because I believe he's going to be going up against Gunther. I'm not going to the Saudi Rumble currently. I'm going to speak to my friend Ollie and see if he wants to go, but I don't think I'm going to the Saudi Rumble. And I don't think I'm going to be going to Vegas for WrestleMania again because I did that last year. I'm someone who's been to Vegas so many times. It's not special for me because I've been there so many times. And when I go to WrestleMania, I usually like to go to a new state, or I like to go to a state that I don't go to all the time. So New Orleans, where it was supposed to be originally, was perfect for me because every time I've been to New Orleans, it's coincided with wrestling. I've been to an Elimination Chamber there. I've been to WrestleMania 30. I've been to WrestleMania 34. And I have absolutely zero interest in going to Vegas. I'm also, not podcasting about it as much. I have recently started to do my YouTubes again. And if you guys haven't been listening to or watching my YouTubes, head over to YouTube and catch up with the content because I've been doing videos every week until this week. I took this week off because I've had some minor surgery, but I'll be back on YouTube next week. But as I've not been doing content and I've not been doing this podcast every single week, and I'm not really making as much money from wrestling as I used to. There isn't a major need for me to religiously follow this product. I've been selling off lots of my stuff. I told you just now, I look through my cupboards, I see my things, and I think, why do I need this? Why do I need so much? Why do I need to clutter up my apartment? If I want to move from here, or if I want to leave the UK, I have to take all this shit with me. Why do I need all of this shit? That was never my attitude towards my WWE collectibles, and specifically my autographs. But now, over the past 6 or 7 months, I've sold more things than I've ever sold before, and I'm going to sell more moving forward. I hate the fans more than ever. I hate these fans more than ever. And it's not just the tribal AEW fans, it's the WWE fans as well. The turning point for me was the death of Hulk Hogan. And seeing the reaction to the death of Hulk Hogan, I really felt, even though obviously there was these woke liberal losers who were always anti-Hogan and were the same people who booed Hogan on the Netflix debut show, I always felt like that if Hulk Hogan passed away, people would come together. It wouldn't be a 50-50 divide. But what did we see? We saw the 50-50 divide. And for me, that was a major turning point. For me, that was a major turn off. And it really made me realise that I am not now among like-minded people. I am in a huge minority of people who have a life and consume wrestling on the side. Because really, and it probably does cater to people who do have a life, they're just probably in that non-vocal majority. But unfortunately, I'm exposed to the vocal and the very, very loud vocal minority who make up the internet wrestling community, who are your podcast listeners, who are your YouTube watchers. And I'm always going to be exposed to that whilst I continue to do content. So I can either shut off, cut all my content off, and just enjoy wrestling as a casual fan. Or if I choose to continue to do podcasts and doing YouTubes, I'm going to expose myself to the obsessive fans. And those same obsessive fans are more of the ones who are tribal, who engage in that tribal WWE, AEW stuff, and are also the ones who enjoyed the death of Hulk Hogan. And for me, that was a major, major turnoff. I hate TKO. I hate the non-Vince version of WWE. I hate things like the rainbow shit that CM Punk and AJ wore for their match. That's an immediate turn off for me. I don't want to see that in wrestling. I don't want to see wrestling whore itself out to sponsors. I hate the adverts. I hate Triple H. I hate the press conferences. I hate all the "are you ready" bullshit. Just fuck off. You're not Vince. You don't have a creative brain cell in your head. You're a fraud, and people are starting to see you're a fraud. And this company taking over the WWE is the worst thing to ever happen to the WWE. And one thing I've hated lately, so what are we up to? G. I hate the chants. I hate the fact that we started a Roman Reigns chant in the UK, which is from the band ABBA. And you can go and look up the song. It's Daddy Cool. And it's a chant from the song Daddy Cool. And instead of chanting Daddy Cool, we change it to Roman Reigns. And now it's a fucking chant that they use for every single fucking wrestler, which is why you hear Cody Rhodes, and not just Roman Reigns. And they decide to make it applicable to every single person that they can, including Dirty Dom, which is what we hear. And it's become fucking insufferable and intolerable to hear it on every single show. I hate the fans. I hate the fan base. I hate TKO. And we're up to G. H, I'm genuinely bored. I watch the show in intervals, as I said earlier. Sometimes I finish Raw as late as Thursday. And it's almost like I suffer through shows. I check how long left as I go through my phone. And if you compare this to all of the other content available, it really does make you wonder why you watch the WWE. And that brings me to my next point, which is Everything I watch on TV is better. Anything I watch on YouTube is better than the WWE. Anything I watch on Instagram is better than the WWE. Nothing I watch is less interesting. So it's essentially like watching something for a job. That's how I feel about the WWE right now. It's like a fucking job, but it's not a job because I'm hardly making any money from watching it. Apart from on my Patreon account, which you guys should all be subscribing to, which is breaking all of the latest accurate news for the WWE. If you want that, head over to thedirtysheets.com and sign up to the Patreon page. Jay, my friends who all got back into the WWE the last 3 years have dropped off. Not a single one of my friends other than my mate Ollie are going to WrestleMania 42. That's a massive drop off from the 10-12 guys who went to the last Mania. But ultimately, that was Vegas, and they don't want to return to Vegas. They're also underwhelmed by the Mania. So it's almost like that Mania single-handedly killed off their interest. And finally Kay, I don't like anybody I see on TV. Now, I was, and I still am a fan of Roman Reigns, but I'm not in love with this current incarnation of Roman Reigns. I was in love with the Bloodline version of Roman Reigns, the real tribal chief. And whilst it is great when he's on TV, I'm a little bit bored of the constant returns. And that's probably the only character I like. That's probably the only guy who comes on TV now where I say, that's my guy. I have a nostalgic feel towards John Cena, yes. But when you're looking at any of the new guys, when you're looking at any of the women, when you're looking at the guys in the top positions, your Gunthers, your Seth Rollins, your Cody Rhodes, I can't stand them. In fact, I actually dislike Cody Rhodes, Jey Uso, Sami Zayn, CM Punk. When they come on TV, they bore me. I hate seeing these people on TV. I genuinely don't like their characters. I don't think that they are interesting in any way. I think for CM Punk, it's more of a personal thing. I have a personal dislike towards CM Punk, but I don't like Jey Uso. I hate Sami Zayn. Cody Rhodes bores me to death. And I can replicate that opinion for a number of other wrestlers. There are a rare few that I find interesting when they're on TV. I'd say Dominic Mysterio's interesting. I would probably find Punk interesting if I actually liked him. Obviously, I've mentioned Roman Reigns. Tiffany Stratton is great to look at. And Rhea Ripley can be at times, but Rhea Ripley's a terrible promo. Rhea Ripley is a terrible actress. A lot of these guys and girls still don't know how to act, which makes it very difficult to do compelling storylines. Obviously, the writing's terrible, the creative's terrible, they don't give them reasons to fight, but there are sometimes talents who are there, who can go out there and fill in the blanks because they're just so unbelievably talented and they can carry poor storylines. I don't think we have enough people who are capable of doing that right now. So it does make the product even more difficult to watch when people can just go out there and they can do and they can have these paint-by-number wrestling matches, and everybody out there can do the same old match, the 1-2 kick out, 1-2 kick out, hit 100 finishers, which is basically the entire match that John Cena and AJ Styles had on Saturday. But that's not enough for me. That's not enough. It's so overdone that I don't find these wrestling matches remotely interesting. I need a story, and at the moment we are not getting a story. So I will await the explanation for what happens on Monday from this group. I imagine it probably is centered around a Seth Rollins injury, because otherwise it wouldn't make sense. Because of how overpushed Seth Rollins is and how much Triple H loves him, I very, very much doubt this is a case of WWE turning around and saying, this isn't working. Seth Rollins isn't working. Our top act isn't working and has to be held responsible for why these ratings are dwindling. That I don't feel is going to be the case. I do believe that there is probably going to be some type of injury issue, because I just don't think that it's realistic in my eyes that Triple H would turn on his boy, Seth Rollins. But If that is the case, I believe that is a positive thing. I believe that's a step in a positive direction, giving us a fresh new story and maybe giving us a fresh heel on top and maybe even giving us a fresh champion. Because if you're going to do that, if you've decided to turn around and say that Seth Rollins isn't our guy and we're holding Seth Rollins responsible for the ratings decline and the lack of interest in WWE right now across the board, then you have to take the title off him and you have to start with a fresh face, which would be Bron Breakker. And for me, that would be a step in the right direction. And it would make WWE a lot more interesting and a lot less predictable going into 2026. So at this point, we should talk about the Crown Jewel pay-per-view. I was supposed to talk about WrestlePalooza, and I was going to use this show to touch on WrestlePalooza, but there really isn't any point. It was an underwhelming show, and I'm one of these people who didn't have any issue with what they did with Brock Lesnar and John Cena. You need to bring back Brock Lesnar strong. Brock Lesnar hasn't been on television for 2 years. And now you're bringing him back. He looks great. Obviously, this is a guy who's a genuine tough guy. He was an ex-UFC heavyweight champion. So I'm completely fine with you trying to get what you can out of Brock Lesnar. At the end of the day, Brock Lesnar is the one who's going to draw money for you over the next few years. Brock Lesnar is the one who's going to be working at the next WrestleMania, and Brock Lesnar is going to be the one who's working at the WrestleMania after that. John Cena's gone in December. So whilst John Cena got the win over Logan Paul, which I didn't agree with, and I did agree with him getting the win over AJ Styles because AJ Styles is leaving next year, and I did agree with booking John Cena a lot stronger this year and actually making him the champion, because prior to that, whilst it was right for him to do some jobs, he lost to far too many people. Losing to Solo Sikoa and losing to Austin Theory, that shouldn't have been how John Cena was ever booked. It's one thing to do some jobs and put people over and elevate people, but John Cena lost a lot of credibility by losing to some of the people he lost to. So they did a good job in getting John Cena strong again. But ultimately, on his way out, he does need to put over some people. I think he should have lost to both Logan Paul and Brock Lesnar. Ultimately, he only lost to Brock Lesnar, and I'm fine with it. That wasn't one of my complaints. It was just the whole of the rest of the show. It was poor. It was something that you could completely skip. And that was ultimately my feelings about WrestlePalooza. Now, moving on to this Crown Jewel pay-per-view, because WrestlePalooza was so poor, I believe people have gone over the top with how they've rated this particular pay-per-view. And that includes the John Cena match with AJ Styles. Now, if you're going to go out there and you're going to spam finishes and you're going to spam everybody else's finishes, you're obviously going to have a match which gets people excited. But what did they really do out there? They went out there and done something that other people are not authorized to do. If everybody went out there and they had this match all of the time, it would be a company called AEW, which is what AEW is, which is why AEW isn't interesting, which is why their pay-per-views feel unbelievably long and very, very hard to sit through, because it's the same thing all of the time. It's near finish after near finish after near finish after near finish, and non-selling after non-selling after non-selling, which is ultimately what AJ Styles and John Cena went out there and did. And it makes it very, very difficult to grade this match using our grading rating system. And a part of my grading rating system is to grade the build-up. Now, John Cena and AJ Styles didn't even build their match up, because you used John Cena's appearances up to build up WrestlePalooza, because WrestlePalooza wasn't supposed to be a thing. John Cena and AJ Styles was supposed to be a thing. AJ Styles beating Dominic Mysterio for the Intercontinental title was supposed to be a thing, and John Cena beating AJ for the Intercontinental title was supposed to be a thing for John Cena to get that Grand Slam. None of that happened. You decided to do WrestlePalooza because you wanted to hurt AEW. You added this extra pay-per-view, which meant that you needed John Cena to use 2 days to promote it and obviously then wrestle at a show. We took away 3 Cena dates to promote this match with AJ Styles, and therefore it had no build. So it's going to be a 1 out of 10 for the build, which means this match can go no higher than 4 stars. Now, do I give the bell to bell 10 out of 10 like everybody else with, because they spammed all the finishes? Or do I give it a 5 out of 10 because this is just so lazy? Because It's not what you should do. It doesn't make sense to go out there and hit everybody else's finishes. So I'm not going to give it a 10, but I'm also not going to give it a 5 because I don't want to be a killjoy. I'm going to give it an 8. I'm going to side more towards being okay with what they did because both these guys are leaving soon. But it's not something that you can get away with in any other occasion. The crowd response to it was obviously a 10. And John Cena finishing with the tombstone and then his FU finish. I'm going to give that a 9. So Cena goes over using the tombstone and the attitude adjustment. And he's one of the only guys who can get away with this because it's his farewell tour. He's paying tribute to his ex-opponents. I don't know where he came up with this idea. It wouldn't have lasted. It wouldn't have been able to last the entire year. If he'd done this at the start of the year, it would have got very old very, very quickly. So as he's only got a few matches left, he can get away with it. And I imagine this is what his last 2 matches are going to look like because he's only got 2 left. And I don't think at this point he's going to be on a team at Survivor Series because of the developments that we saw on Monday night. I think that probably takes John Cena out of these teams because I don't really think he fits in with anything. But ultimately, I think this is what we're going to see from John Cena for his last 2 matches. So I'm going to give him a pass for it. For the occasion, as this was the match in the middle of a B pay-per-view, I think it can't be any higher than an 8. I gave the bell to bell a 10. I gave the finish a 9. But as you guys know, I gave the build-up a 1. I gave the build-up a 1 out of 10. So what we end up with is a score of 37. A 9 for the bell to bell, a 9 for the finish, an 8 for the occasion, a 10 for the crowd reaction, and a 1 for the build. Giving it 37, meaning that it cannot get to 4-star, it gets downgraded to 3.5 star. That doesn't sit right with me. I'm trying to think where I could possibly give this an extra mark, and it would only be the build. It would only be elevating it from 1 out of 10 to 2 out of 10 by giving some credit to the build-up videos and the promo that AJ Styles cut on Raw. But that would be the most generous upgrade imaginable. In fact, I feel so uncomfortable doing it, I'm going to bump up the build to 1.5 out of 10. That way, I get to 37.5, so 3.5, exactly at 3.75. Which means I can decide if I want to lean towards 4-star or I want to lean towards 3.5 star. And obviously, as I deliberately manipulated this to give it 1.5 for the build, I want to give it a 4-star match because this was widely considered to be the best match on the card. And therefore, I don't want it to be way short on my ratings because then obviously people will be able to pick flaws in my rating system, which people have actually mostly complimented and agree with because at least it's structured, unlike Dave Meltzer, who blindly gives his opinions and then thinks his opinions are facts, which is completely crazy and delusional. But that is what Meltzer is. He's crazy and delusional. By the way, he got everything on his card wrong. He said Bronson Reed and Roman Reigns would be the main event and that Cody Rhodes and Seth Rollins would be somewhere in the middle of the show. And that actually made sense to me because I knew for a while that Seth Rollins was winning the match. So I thought, oh, okay, Dave knows something because Dave told everyone about the match. He got that part of the story right, but then he got the other part of the story wrong where it was the main event. It was instead the opening match. And I thought this was a decent match. I was surprised by the result. It did make sense in the end from what they were showing us on TV, but given the way Roman Reigns has been booked over the years, it's always a surprise to see him pinned by anyone, especially Bronson Reed. I thought if anybody was going to beat him, they were going to build towards giving that win to Bron Breakker. So I thought the bell-to-bell here was fine. I gave it an 8. I thought the finish was great with the miscommunication with Jey Uso putting Roman through the table. I thought that was pretty shocking. I gave that a 9. For the build, the fact that Roman Reigns even came onto television to build this match is credible. Obviously, we had the long-term storytelling with the Shula Fala, and they also took him off television. I thought the build was solid, especially compared to everything else that we see on WWE TV. So I gave that an 8. For where it was, for the occasion, this is the opening match on a B pay-per-view. I settled on 7 for that. And for the crowd response, I gave that a solid 8. I thought the crowd were pretty into this match. So what I've landed on for that is a 40, an 8, 8, 8, 9, and 7. That is a 40. I completely agree with that. That is a 4-star match, and this was a 4-star match. The only other match I'm going to grade here from this show is the Cody Rhodes match. I'm not going to talk about any of the women's matches. I didn't think that they were very good. So we are going to talk about Seth Rollins versus Cody Rhodes. And I thought the build-up to this was good. I'm going to give that an 8 as well. I thought that this had a pretty solid build. They managed to make the Crown Jewel Championship feel semi-important. Obviously, they hark back to their history. They did make it a little bit too obvious that Seth Rollins was winning this match. And you know what? I'm going to downgrade it for that. It was so obvious that Seth Rollins was winning this match that I'm going to downgrade it from an 8 to a 7. And also anything that involves Cody Rhodes doesn't deserve to be higher than a 7 anyway, because it's just so repetitive. And I have very little interest in Cody Rhodes, and I don't know why I was ever giving anything he did an 8 out of 10, at least for a build-up, from a build-up perspective. For an occasion, it's a main event on a B pay-per-view, so I'm going to give it a 9. The bell-to-bell, I didn't like a lot of the fake-looking stuff in this match. The no-selling, the way that they transitioned into maneuvers. For me, it didn't look very believable. This is the kind of stuff that I don't like. It was very AEW-esque. So I'm actually only going to give the bell-to-bell here a 7. The crowd were semi into it, but not as into it as the matches that we've spoken about earlier. So again, I'm going to go with a 7. And the finish with the watch, I felt that was pretty underwhelming. Obviously, we're used to big finishes at the end of pay-per-views, and maybe we were expecting someone to return. I don't think Austin Theory would have got this any higher of a mark, because that's not a huge return. Depends what you're going to do with Theory moving forwards. But right now, since he beat John Cena, you've booked this guy into the ground. So I don't think it would have generated a huge response or huge buzz on social media that Austin Theory had returned and had aligned himself with the Vision faction, which doesn't even exist anymore, I don't think, because obviously when you call something the Vision, it has to be named after the Visionary, and the Visionary's not even in it. So obviously they're going to continue as a 2-man group next week, but maybe they're going to have themselves a different name. I have no idea what they're going to do moving forward. But anyway, we didn't see Austin Theory. What we saw was a finish here with a watch, and I didn't think that was particularly great. And again, I'm going to give that another 7. So 4 7s here and a 9, which gives this 37, which doesn't give it enough to get it to a 4-star. Do I want to find half a mark to get this to a 4-star? Yeah, let's give it 7.5 for the build. Now I have the option of turning around and saying, is this a 3.5-star match or is this a 4-star match? I've decided that even though I've given it that half mark, that this is a 3.5-star match. I do not think it was as good as Bronson Reed and Roman Reigns. I do not think it was good as Cena and Styles, and I'm happy to say this is the 3rd best match on the card. I'm happy to give it 3.5 stars because I'm not Dave Meltzer. And I'm not going to give high marks to gymnastic-looking, unrealistic, fake shit wrestling, which is what these guys did for a lot of this match. Yes, they worked hard, and yes, some of it was good, but ultimately, I knew the winner, and I was very disinterested in watching this. And this was really what made me think about how long am I going to continue to watch WWE so religiously. And I think Cav is absolutely right when he says you're always going to watch. Of course I'm going to watch, because now it's part of my routine. It's built in. It's like doing other things I don't like to do, like going to the gym. Nobody likes going to the gym. I don't care what anybody says, but for me, it is so fundamentally routine that I always go to the gym 4 or 5 days a week that I will never stop going to the gym, hopefully. And that's the same with the WWE. It's so fundamentally built in. It's just like the gym. It's just like having to look after my son. It's just like having to watch football and support Manchester United. All of these things are completely normalised with me. It's like watching Wimbledon when Wimbledon comes on in the summer. I'm going to do it, but different to these other things. These are things other than the gym and often being a parent. These are most of these things that you continue when they're not an obligation, like being a parent is an obligation. WWE is in fact not an obligation. And you would even say gym is a obligation because it goes along with health benefits. Anything you do for fun is actually supposed to be fun. Watching Wimbledon is fun. Watching football should be fun. Although then again, I would argue that being a Manchester United supporter isn't fun. So WWE falls under that category where it's completely and utterly routine. But there are levels to that. Going to WrestleManias and going to other WWE events is not automatic. Purchasing WWE merchandise is not automatic. Staying up for WWE is not automatic. Consuming Raw or SmackDown the very next day is not automatic. In fact, watching a full episode is not automatic. You can skip through parts. Maybe consuming it through YouTube. That still makes you a fan. That still makes Cav right, where he can turn around and say, you'll never stop watching. And he's right, because I still keep up on YouTube. But am I still going to be the fan who watches an entire episode of Raw and watches it immediately the next day? I know I'm not going to be the fan who continues to pay TKO's ticket prices. And I know I'm not going to be the fan who looks at what's come out, what's new that's come out on WWE.com or on WWE Shop and purchases anything from there. I know that I've moved away from being that type of fan. And you just wonder, are these steps in a direction towards being a much lesser fan, or maybe eventually not being a fan at all? What are the steps that go towards people who were huge WWE fans but are now people who don't watch the product at all and instead have taken their interest towards boxing and UFC, or maybe even something completely different? That always fascinates me. But I wonder if you can even be considered a hardcore fan if you are actually ever able to leave. I always think that if you did leave WWE, you were always probably a casual anyway. But then what constitutes a casual and what constitutes a hardcore? Because I actually have friends who have been into WWE enough to the point where they've attended WrestleManias and now they don't keep up with the product whatsoever. I genuinely have friends that have lost complete and utter interest and don't keep up at all. But they still can be coaxed into dipping into the product once again. If you text them and tell them there's been a major development like they need to watch, such as John Cena turning heel, they can be coaxed back in, which was the case for a number of people back in February and March. So, that's it for this episode. We've covered everything we needed to cover. I've spoken about Crown Jewel. I've spoken about the heel turn. I've spoken a little bit about the state of WWE. I want to do more on that. I want to do more on the TKO thing. What's the general direction of it? Where are we heading towards? What will WrestleMania look like? What will WrestleMania look like the year after that when they go to Saudi? What superstars are they going to be pushing? What's in the future of certain superstars? What superstars are going to be big in the future? What superstars does it look like are never going to be booked correctly? You're looking at your Aleister Blacks, your Rusevs, who've came over from AEW. You're looking at your Finn Balor. There's always something out there saying, oh, Finn Balor's going to get a push. Finn Balor's going to get a push. When's Finn Balor ever going to get a push? What's going on with Bayley? That situation seems to be very, very messy. But at the same time, I'm not one of these people that think Bayley deserves a push. I'm not somebody that thinks that she's particularly talented or particularly interesting or think her matches are that good or think that her characters are interesting. I'm not somebody who thinks that Bayley automatically deserves a push. There's so many people we could be talking about. Where does Liv Morgan fit in when she comes back? Is Rhea Ripley untouchable at this point? And is Rhea Ripley even that talented? What's going on with CM Punk? Does CM Punk actually ever end up winning the championship and having a decent run as a babyface? Or is he always going to be the nearly man? And is there going to be a point where CM Punk evolves into being this guy that they want to use to put people over? And is CM Punk going to be able to cope with that? Is that going to be where WWE's relationship with CM Punk, which seems positive at the moment to the point where his wife can even come back onto TV and be a part of the company and she gets herself a contract, is that relationship going to fall apart when CM Punk leaves the main event scene? What about his wife? Where does she fit in? She was supposed to obviously come and chase the Intercontinental Championship with Becky Lynch, but now you seemingly turn Seth Rollins heel. What does that mean for Becky Lynch? Where do things pick up with Becky Lynch and AJ? And where do things even go with CM Punk and Seth Rollins moving forward? So much stuff we could have spoken about, but then this would have been a 2-hour podcast. And even as we are approaching 56 minutes, I wonder if people have the attention span to listen to a 56-minute podcast, especially when I spoke at length about attention span on this show and how WWE is a product that isn't good enough at this point to hold people's attention. When you compare it to all of the other stuff out there, when you look at TikToks, when you look at Instagram, when you look at Reels, when you look at YouTube content, do people want to invest in a 2.5-hour episode of Raw? And I ask myself the same question. Do people want to invest their time listening to me talking for what is going to be 57 minutes? I guess we'll find out, because that is the end of the show. I hope you guys find it enjoyable. You can find me on YouTube every single week. I will try to do podcasts as well. I will try to do both because I do want to get back into wrestling content. I've been inspired by people who are terrible doing massive numbers. So if they can do numbers, I can do numbers, because not only do I bring interesting opinion, I bring a vast background of knowledge. Obviously, my knowledge is untouchable when it comes to talking about things from the past. And I can also analyse and give good insight on what I see coming forward in the future. And obviously that's aided by having very, very decent news sources as well. And if you want to get my news, be sure to head over to thedirtysheets.com. We've been great again all throughout this year, absolutely nailing all of the stories that we've put out. So we look to continue to do so. And that's just going to cost you $5 a month to sign up to that Patreon page. If you're an actual wrestling fan, it's well worth it. If you want to get the real news, if you don't want to get Sean Ross Sapp's bullshit, and Sean Ross Sapp, he's not got any sources anymore because he's hardly reporting anything. He's really, really struggling to fulfill his quota. And we know Dave Meltzer is full of shit. And other people as well, they've gone very, very quiet. There really isn't too much out there at the moment from Mike Johnson. And for me, I don't force it. I don't force the bullshit. I don't try to do 5 or 6 stories per week. If I do news, it's real news, and you'll be able to find it at thedirtysheets.com. That's it for me. Thanks for listening.